Hey everyone, it is 19 weeks and 1 day, 133 days, or about 4 months until my birthday. And we are on book, I believe, number, should know this, 5. So we're doing really well. After this, there's 3 more books. And so um, one of them is really short. So today we're talking about Tom Robbins's longest book ever, and it took um, quite a for longer than normal. Usually it's 4 years between books. This was about 5 years between books, 1990, and so it kind of makes sense that his longest book that he has, because he had a little more time with it, and it's called Skinny Legs and All. And I will start by reading you a quote, not from the back of the book, because that'll come later, but by Neil Peart of Rush says about this book: funny, sexy, imaginative, and playful, yet has an underlying texture both beautiful and profound. And so I would consider this Tom Robbins's most didactic book. And I just had to look up the definition to make sure I was using that correctly. But really, not only teaching the reader through the characters about the history of certain things, but also to it was I mean, it's he's sort of like giving you his, philosophy, as in all of his other books, right? But this seems like there's a lot to learn, um I mean, as far as I can tell, it's all real stuff. I will get into what the thing is that he's teaching us in here. So he's teaching us, you know, about ancient history, really, in the Middle East through very different characters. So on the cover of Skinny Legs and All, there's this famous picture of a ballet dancer, or Salome, the Dance of the Seven Veils. And so that's how this book is structured through each veil. Each veil is something, so he calls the Dance of the Seven Veils the dance of ultimate cognition. And so each veil is something that is covering us, and as it is dropped, the reality or truth or ultimate cognition is revealed to us. I mean, you can read the book and see for yourself what those 7 veils are, what Tom Robbins thinks those 7 veils are across us. Um, so uh, the what's also in this book is something I don't understand, so I would love it if anyone actually. I've been to chat rooms and trying to figure it out, but it's the Room of the Wolfmother wallpaper. The Room of the Wolfmother wallpaper. And that's how it starts out, and they're interludes, just like in his Still Life with Woodpecker. We'd have those interludes with the typewriter, right? And so we have these interludes with the Wolfmother wallpaper, and I have anyway, I don't know what that means. So, and I've read a lot and I don't know exactly what that means. So, anyway, so the book is in the sections. And so here are our characters, right? We have Ellen Cherry Charles, which was in our previous book, Jitterbug Perfume, as a waitress in Seattle. A waitress, and she's an artist, but she's originally from the East Coast. We have Boomer Petway, her partner, who's a welder from Virginia. We have the Airstream turkey. We learned about that pretty quickly. And we also learn she has her parents. Her parents are really important in this character. Ellen Cherry's parents are important. And then she has this Uncle Buddy Winkler, who's a reverend, and apparently, an uncle as in like a distant cousin or something. He's not actually her father's brother. And those are really important people. We'll talk about them a little bit more and give you some quotes from particularly Buddy Winkler. So Jezebel is a big character in this. Jezebel, like the biblical, an historic person. Also Jezebel as a theme or a motif of the goddess and the feminine. And Jezebel is sort of like this part of Ellen Cherry because her father and her uncle rescued her. Talk about early, not just a childhood trauma or any kind of traumatic event, rescued her from her art studies at junior college and rubbed off her makeup and called her Jezebel, and that kind of stuff. And so she develops this fascination for Jezebel, like who really was she, like and that kind of thing. So we get to be taught who Jezebel was, and we get to be taught about the historical Jezebel and the biblical Jezebel and King Herod and all that stuff through the most amazing characters that I've ever really come across. And they are Painted Stick, Conch Shell, the Can of Beans, Sock, and a spoon. And so these inanimate objects and the way that they can move and talk are a big part of this story, and actually a truly enjoyable part. And it always makes me think twice about inanimate objects, and especially when we talk about things always being made up of particles and those kinds of things. And like if something is in a different place when you set it down, like did you just forget where you set it down, or did it decide to take a little walk? Anyway, so that's what I think about. But anyway, these are really great characters and they're super, super smart. So and so Can of Beans is a Painted Stick and Conch Shell are from Jerusalem. They are from the Middle East, and somehow they ended up in a cave and were called to life by Boomer and Ellen Cherry on their honeymoon. And so they tell the story, and Can of Beans and Sock and Spoon, belong to Boomer and Ellen Cherry, so they have their own understanding of these things. So anyway, so one of my favorite quotes in here, and I think it's something I just need to put on everywhere, like for my students and people that interact with me, because it's kind of a pet peeve of mine when people speak imprecisely or incorrectly, like not like their language or their dialect or whatever, but like the things that they are talking about, they don't define very well. And so they'll say, oh, just, that thing there. I'm like, what thing? Like, anyway. So Can of Beans is apparently my spirit inanimate object. So they learn how to move, right? And Dirty Sock, they call him Dirty Sock. Damn good, buddy, said Dirty Sock. This locomotion is neat, but I tell you, I'm feeling pretty spaced out. Pardon me for saying so, Mr. Sock, Can of Beans counseled, but you really ought not to use that slang. The stocking was stung. What's the damn matter with it? He asked. Well, said Can of Beans, a bit hesitantly. Imprecise speech is one of the major causes of mental illness in human beings. Ponder that. Anyway, me and Can of Beans. All right, so you have this great story. And all in the backdrop is the crisis in the Middle East, which we currently have today. Uncle Buddy is a reverend, and he is seeking the third temple. And if you don't know what that is, you will find out. Conk and Stick are eager to return to their thinking the third temple is coming to, but for completely different reasons, because they're not Christian and Buddy Winkler is Christian. So the return of the third temple means very different things to these objects. And then, as it says in the back of the book, an Arab and a Jew open a restaurant together across the street from the United Nations. And that is Isaac and Ishmael's, where Ellen Cherry becomes a waitress. And it's really Spike and Abu who are the owners of this. And I'm just going to read a couple quotes because you can see what Spike and Abu are trying to do with this restaurant. And then you can see this Buddy Winkler, which would be the conservative Christian response, perhaps, to this celebration. And I think we see it, I mean, it's very prescient that we see it today, that the people who are acknowledging and celebrating differences as a strength versus some that, well, you'll see the quote. So the reason that they want to open the restaurant is, and this is Abu, who is a Muslim, the Arab, and he says, and he talks about the differences between, he says, in my opinion, those differences can be good. What a dull world this would be were we all alike. What an evolutionary dead end. To be brothers, to live in peace, we do not have to be overly similar. We do not have to even admire alike in others' peculiarities. We need only to respect those peculiarities and be grateful for them. Our similarities provide us with a common ground, but our differences allow us to be fascinated by one another. Differences give human encounters their snap, their fizz, and their brew. So that's what they're trying to prove with this restaurant, with all the stuff going on in the Middle East. And Buddy Winkler and his third temple people are not approving of this at all. When Ellen Cherry tells Buddy that Abu and Spike are really nice people, he says, kind and decent, got nothing to do with it. In the end times, there are to be many false prophets and false religions. You little lady, your false religion is art. Ellen Cherry's an artist. Berlin, I often suspect his religion is football. He ain't alone in that, let me tell you. Patsy's religion, I don't want to speculate on. That's Ellen's mom. But the most insidious and dangerous of false religions is secular humanism. It's so crafty, so sneaky with its kindness and its decency that only Satan himself could come up with it. Well, that's precisely what them two old peaceniks practice, and that's precisely why they're so offensive to the truly devout, including the devout Muslims and Jews. Secular humanism versus religious faith. Not getting into that debate, but I think it's interesting how kindness and wanting to get along can sometimes be vilified, and also sometimes be to be made illegal in a lot of places. The kindness can be. All right, so we're more than 3/4 of the way in. Everyone's trying to make their way east. Everyone is in New York, or they're going to try to make their way to Jerusalem. And finally, we get the belly dancer at Isaac and Ishmael's, and Salome, who they just call her Salome, who will do the dance of the seven veils. And so there's some, controversy around that. The dance of the seven veils, is it really a dance? Like, did Oscar Wilde invent it? Google it. So Salome is really kind of crafty, and she says she will only do the dance of the seven veils on a certain date at a certain time, and it turns out to be the same time that the Super Bowl kickoff is, and the same time, and then the New York football team is in the Super Bowl. Anyway, so these men who have been watching Salome, and women have been watching Salome dance and been mesmerized by her, have to make a choice to watch the Super Bowl or Salome dance. So wait till you get to that and see who chooses what. There's a couple connections to Jitterbug Perfume. I mean, as you read them in order, you see that uh, Ellen Cherry thinks like life is like a test that most people will fail it. And in Jitterbug Perfume, there is a test in the afterlife or the midlife that Kudra gets to, and some people fail it and some people pass it. And then in Tom Robbins talks about the over emphasis on people, particularly Christians. As we know, Tom Robbins is not Christian. He's very anti-Christian dogma, not necessarily like Christian, like Jesus and as a historical figure and the influence that he had over people, but this dogma and this idea that radical Christians, or I'm not actually sure that's the word, who believe in an afterlife have no problem destroying a planet because they have a place that they will go in the afterlife. And so this idea that there's a place for them to go that's going to be beautiful, land of milk and honey, or whatever, allows them to be really irresponsible with the current planet that they're on. And I mean, I buy that argument a lot, actually. So anyway, it is his longest book. It is fun. I mean, if you want to, learn a lot about the Middle East history, um, you know, um, get some philosophy from Canna Beans. It's great. I mean, I highly recommend it. It is a really long one. And I'll just end with this quote that just kind of sums up the sort of positive, while like a lot of those things seem to be kind of heavy, right? There's this positive underlying notion, kind of back to that Neil Peart quote. But so Ellen Cherry wakes up and felt better, and undoubtedly it was a matter of attitude. When a person accepts a broader definition of reality, a broader net is cast upon the waters of fortune. And I just love that because it's like, instead of having these narrow kinds of conceptions of what should happen and what ought to be, we can accept things as they are and perhaps more have a more fortunate and pleasant life. All right, that was super babbling. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this book talk. 3 more to go and 133 days to the party. Thanks.